What would you say are the worst things that, for instance, we could be feeding a dog?
Such a great question and a broad question. Some of the worst things. So first of all, let's start with the best things we can feed. What I
Yeah, please,
tell
please.
my clients, anyone who will listen to me, podcast, the lady at the grocery store, what I tell everyone is the same advice I would give you and your two-legged family. Feed the best quality food you can afford to feed your family. So if you can afford to buy organic or spray-free fruits and vegetables, do it. Because eating a bunch of pesticides, I mean, our bodies are already working hard. We're already, trying to keep our microbiomes healthy. Ingesting a bunch of chemicals that aren't necessary, like if we can avoid that, do it. And so eating organic food or spray-free food is a really good common sense choice. I would say extend that same courtesy to your dogs and cats if you can. The more nutritional diversity you can provide. So rotating between proteins, feeding chicken and beef. So chicken is hands down the most common protein fed to dogs worldwide because it's the cheapest protein. Chicken has a lot of omega-6s, a lot of those pro-inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids, not to mention it's just one type of protein. So feeding a little chicken now and then is cool, but feeding chicken in rotation with beef, turkey, quail, ostrich, goat, pheasant, venison, elk, rabbit, like feeding all of those proteins is extra amazing for the microbiome because you're giving all this opportunity for this diverse protein to come in and build different colonies of microbes. And that's a great idea. And then we have to think about processing. So at the worst end of the scale is semi-moist food, which is food that has been high heat processed several times and then has all these extra chemicals that have been added to the food to create this synthetic semi-moist appearance. That's the most highly processed, least nutritious food. Then it's the extruded dry food. The average raw ingredients in dry kibble have been high heat processed 4 times. Not to mention, it's not really metabolically specific for dogs, meaning I mentioned that dogs don't have a carb requirement. Kitties are obligate carnivores. And when we think about 50% carbs being in most dry food, that's a whole lot of starch and sugar for an animal that doesn't metabolically require any. So high heat processed dry food not only doesn't have the nutrients included, so they have to be synthetically added back in at the end of processing, but it's that same monotonous diet that the pet food companies don't want to hear this conversation at all. What they want is for you to buy the exact same brand of kibble for the dog's whole life, because then they have a buyer for life. But we know that metabolically and nutritionally, not to mention microbially within our guts, that's the least optimal for dogs and cats. So then we start looking down the least processed scale. And so the opposite of kibble, we have raw food. And in the US, we have pathologically controlled raw food. All commercially available unprocessed diets in the US have to be checked to make sure that their pathogens have been controlled. So there's no risk of humans getting salmonella or E. coli. So raw food would be the healthiest food because it contains all the vitamins and minerals and nutrients that have been unprocessed in their whole refined edible form. That's exactly how dogs and cats evolved to eat food, was raw. Then we have gently cooked. That's a fastest growing industry of the pet food segment in the US. So people that are making commercial human grade diets and then gently cooking them and freezing them. And that's a great option because all of those raw materials in the food have only been high heat processed once, and once is better than 4 times. Not to mention it's this moisture dense food, which is really good for the body. Then we have freeze dried and dehydrated foods, which are still significantly healthier than ultra processed dry foods. And then from there, we have kind of this mid range category that includes air dried or gently baked cooked cooking mechanisms. And then we have all of the dry foods that go on to high heat processing. So healthiest foods would be raw foods that are nutritionally complete. And the unhealthiest foods are the canned, dry, and semi-moist foods.